And we have Ang and Kevin here. Come on, guys, take it off. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yep, so, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's had a lovely lunch over at the atrium. Welcome to When the Trail Goes Cold, Unearthing Veiled Evidence in Windows Event Logs. This talk will be about a time when we worked with missing pieces in the Windows event logs and recovered those missing pieces by closely inspecting the artifact. By way of introduction, my name is Kevin Kim. I'm an incident response consultant at Google, Mandiant Google Cloud. I'm based out of the Singapore office, 12 hours difference in time zone. I've been with the company for slightly more than a year now. And with me is Ihan.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ang Ihan, and I'm also an incident response consultant. I've been in this industry for more than 9 years. So yeah, I'm also based out of Singapore. So happy to meet you guys. Back to you.
Yeah, so agenda for today, we'll start by giving you a background of how we ended up in the situation of having to work with these missing pieces of event logs, and also what piqued our interest to dig deeper into these logs. Then we'll cover some of the common tools we use to parse and process these event logs. And as the title of this talk alludes to, not all the tools provided the necessary precision to sufficiently engage with the logs. Then we'll do a deep dive into the internal structures of the EVTX files, storing these Windows event logs, and our learnings from the overall experience, and of course, our takeaways and lessons learned from this case study. Before we get started, just a quick disclaimer that some of the facts of this case study have been obscured to protect the identity of our customers and the individuals associated with our customers. Right, so without further ado, so the background was that there was an organization that had fallen victim to a ransomware incident that encrypted their production servers and was experiencing a major disruption to their business. Their internal security team had performed an initial assessment, but they were unable to identify how the threat actor had gotten in or whether there were any signs of lateral movement within their environment. And most importantly, this organization needed help in recovering from this incident and the assurance that their business environment was once again safe for operation. So following our initial discussion with the victim organization, we kickstarted our IR investigation based on our IR methodology. As some of the folks in the audience may be intimately familiar with, we start our IR process by getting into a scoping call with the victim organization to understand the current situation that they're currently in, some of the actions that they have taken so far, and also in the initial set of endpoints that they believe to have been impacted. Then we perform a deep dive analysis of these initial set of endpoints to answer questions such as how the malware got in, how the ransomware encryptions are being performed, and how the threat actors are moving laterally across these endpoints. From these deep dive analysis, we gather a set of IOCs, or indicators of compromise, or attacker TTPs, relevant to this investigation, and perform a sweep across the victim environment to identify any additional set of endpoints that may have been impacted but have not been surfaced from our initial scoping call. Then we continue this iterative process until we gain a full understanding of attacker methodologies before we move on to eradication, remediation, and recovery from the incident. And for any form of investigation, there is no analysis to be conducted if there is no data to look at. In Mandiant, we perform data collection using two primary modes of data collection: live response and forensic imaging. In live response, we're mostly concerned with collecting the metadata about the evidence on the systems of interest. So rather than collecting a bit-by-bit copy of all the hard disks attached to those systems, we collect evidence at the metadata level, including things like the file listing, shim caches, and of course the Windows event logs. The benefit of this live response collection approach is that it's fast and scalable. So rather than collecting a bit-by-bit copy of 500 gigs or even terabytes of data that we typically see in corporate laptops, we simply collect 2 to 3 gigabytes of lightweight metadata that provide immediate and a good enough understanding of the events that may have transpired on those systems. But of course, the disadvantage of this live response approach is its level of depth. So while this metadata level evidence does provide a good enough understanding of the overall timeline of events, it is not a replacement for the byte level representation of data that a forensic image provides, which we do require to perform additional tasks such as file carving, keyword searching, or even gaining access to evidence that is not collected at the metadata level. And that was the essence of the problem that we faced in this situation. So from the live response data that we had collected from those initial set of systems of interest, while we did see some signs of the threat actor interactively logging on to those target systems, we were failing to piece together the source of the login. And this was mainly due to 3 reasons. First, the Windows event logs that would have recorded these login activities on those systems were basically missing. They had poor retention and dated only a few days from the date of collection. Second, these Windows event logs were, in addition, not centralized to any SIM, which means that access to the historical records of these logs that would have captured these login information was ruled out. And lastly, no EDR was installed on these systems, which could have supplemented our analysis. So that being said, we've decided to pivot from our live response analysis to obtaining and analyzing the forensic image of those systems. And interestingly, when we ran a keyword search of the IOCs that we had collected on those forensic images, we started seeing remnants of those Windows event logs that captured the source of these login information that we had believed to have been rotated from the live response data that we were looking at previously. This logging discrepancy between the live response data and the forensic image got us very curious, so we decided to pull up our sleeves, extract the raw EVTX files that store these Windows event logs, and delve deeper to see what was going on there. In the next few slides, Ihan will cover some of the tools we used to parse and process these logs, and some of our learnings from delving deep into this log artifact. Over to you.
Sure. So thank you, Kevin. So I just want to highlight once again, from the keyword search itself, we do see the presence of the indicators within the event logs files. But right now, what is the most important thing is to understand what are some of these hits represents, right? Do they represent that there's interactive logons, or is it just mentions of these indicators, and how does it help with our investigations? So what I'm going to go through next in the next few slides is going to be some of the common tools that we're going to use for handles Windows event logs files, and we're going to see how it's going to help us with our investigations. So the first one is going to be the Windows Event Viewer. This is a pretty common tool because it's going to be pre-shipped or pre-built within the Windows operating systems. You just need to open up the applications. You can view the Windows events that is going to be within the system itself. Or if you wish to open up for the evidence that you have acquired, you can open these events log files with the application as well. So these are user interface applications. What you're going to see is that at the top, based on my screenshots on the left side, you're going to see that for this artifact itself, there's going to be only 25 records. And within the view, you're going to see that there are informations such as the timestamps that the record is being created or generated. You're going to see information such as the event ID as well as other informations. But this does not tell us, what is this record about, right? So when you want to dive deeper into each record, you're going to be presented with two views. The first one is going to be the XML view, which is going to be shown on the right side. What you're going to have is information such as the event ID once again, the timestamp that is being created, as well as one of the key metadata, which is the event record ID. So these event record IDs are actually identifiers for each event records. So as they are being generated, these numbers will be updated and tagged to each records. And as you can see, the first record that is available to us is going to be dated on the 28th of May, and the event record ID is going to be at 810. Whereas for the last record, which is the 25th record, is going to be the 834. So another thing, another view is going to be the text view itself. So what's going to be different is that over here in the XML view, you don't really get to see, what is event ID 40. You may not understand what is event ID 24. So in the text view, what happens is it's going to take some of these variables within the XML and apply it to a text template. With that, you can have a human readable information for you to understand what was this record about. One of the cons about this user interface tool is that if you wish to have kind of like an overview about what's happening during a certain period and so forth, you can't do it in like a single view itself. So you probably have to click each record itself and kind of view it in the text view or in the XML view. So the next tool is going to be the log view plus. So this tool, the slight difference is that, as you can see on the screenshots on the right, you're going to see the message view itself. What's going to happen is the text template itself or the message template itself is going to be applied with those variables. So if you wish to have an overview on what is all the records about, you can just quickly scroll through, or if you wish to look around at some of the event records that's prior or after certain specific records, you can look at it in a single view. But however, for this tool itself, once again, it's using the same records, same event log file. It's going to show you that there's only 25 records, right? So the next one would be one of the pretty famous tools itself. This is going to be the EVTX command. This tool itself is going to be run on the terminal, right? So the past few tools is going to be user interface. For this one, it's going to be running on the terminal. What's good about this tool is that you can export all these records into a different format. For example, the CSV format or the JSON format. With that, you can then ingest the output to your analysis platforms, or open it up with other tools, or even use raw search on the output itself. And also one of the key things is if you take a look at the screenshots on the right at the bottom, you're going to see that this tool also provides kind of like a statistics. It shows that what is the unique event ID that's available within the file, as well as the occurrence of the event ID. But however, for this tool itself, it's going to show you that there is also up to a total of 25 records that's retrievable. And it also shows you kind of like a earliest record that's available to you, as well as the latest record. And now, I believe everyone is probably tired of looking at just Windows compatible tool itself. So what I'm going to go through is going to be the Python EVTX. So as the name suggests, it's going to be a Python library itself. So it's going to be available for different type of operating systems, Windows, Linux, or Mac operating system, right? So for the Python EVTX tool itself, it's come with quite a few mini tools or sub tools within this library. So for example, if you look at the screenshots on the left, it's going to provide you kind of like a generic information relating to the event log file. And on the right, that's where you get to dump out the records in a XML format. So on the left side, what we get to see is by using these tools, we're going to see that there's going to be 25 records as shown at the bottom right. So it's going to show you that file, the first is 1, the last is 25, which represents the total number of records available. Once again, we're going to see similar numbers. It's going to tell you that the first record identifier is going to be at 810, and then the last is going to be 834. At the top, also, you get to see that there's also a place that talks about the next record. So over here, oh, okay, it's not obvious. So the next record is going to show you that the next event record that's going to be written, it will be tagged as the identifier 835, right? And on the right, by applying some of the filters, what we did is the output itself, we just want to show you the list of the event record IDs. That's where you can see all the 25 records available, and starting from 810 and all the way to 834. And finally, it would be a very different tool. So this is called EVTX track. What you're going to see is from the screenshots at the top left, you're going to see that after running the file itself, the exact file itself through these tools, you're going to see that there's a mentions at the last two line, which is recovered 77 complete record. That's interesting because based on what we have gone through in quite a past few slides, most of the time the tools are giving us 25 records. For this tool, it actually gives us 50 more records. So we'll take a deeper look into this at the next few slides. But for this tool itself, when you try to dump it out and try to filter it, we are really getting 77 records as shown at the bottom side. And of course, at the right, screenshots are just going to be some filtering being done after dumping out the records. And I'm just going to show the event records ID. From the top side, you can see that the earliest event record ID is going to start at 690. And that's a lot, right? Because in the previous few slides, most of the time, the earliest record we can see is going to start at 810. So what does this mean now? This means that within the event log file itself may contain historical records that certain tools are not able to extract it out. And sometimes these kind of informations would be very important for our investigations. And in this case, yes, it definitely helps. So before I talk more about it, I just want to talk more about our discovery, right? So what we have discovered is that when event logs are being rotated, they are not necessarily going to be completely erased. They may still stay within the event log file itself. And in this case, that's what we actually found out. And what is the concept of this, right? How is it even possible? So think of it as file carving, right? So when files are being permanently deleted, they may not be totally erased from the system itself, right? You can through carvings and through extracts all these files out from itself. The same concept applies to the event log file itself. So what is going to happen is that later in the next few slides, we're going to see that how some of these rotated logs are still going to be recycled within the event log file itself. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about how can we then try to carve it out. But back to the investigations, or rather the analysis that we are doing, right? Because we are able to extract all this information out, we are able to identify how the threat actors was pivoting within the environment. And that allows us to trace back to some of the systems that may not be impacted by the ransomware. And with that, that's also one of the key pointers that help us to identify how the threat actors manage to gain initial access within the environment. And this helps us to piece out the whole complete attack path performed by the threat actors, which will contribute to our remediation efforts. Because without having the full attack path, we will not know the full indicators being used by the threat actors, the full systems that's going to be within scopes, and we are not able to perform the proper or complete remediations during our later process, right? So with that, now I would like to dive deep into the Windows event log itself. So just want to share that in some of the screenshots that I'll be showing in the next few slides, it's going to come from this tool called imHex. It's not just another hex editor. What's special about this tool is you can define structures within the hex editor itself. And when you are opening a file through this tool, these structures that you have defined will be applied to the file that you have opened. So as you can see on the screenshots on the left side, there's going to be a lot of colors, right? So the content within the file that you open is going to be like beautified or going to be grouped with colors based on the structures you define on the right side. And now let's begin to dive deep into Windows event log file itself. So the first things when you're going to see when you open up this file, in hex editor or other, printing out the contents, you're going to see the first things that is going to be shown to you is going to be the magic header, or rather the signature. So in this event log file itself, the magic header is going to start off with the ELF file. And what we're going to see within the structure itself, you're going to see some of the things such as your next record identifier. You're going to see the header block size as well. And this is also been shown in some of the screenshots earlier as well. So over at the right side is the tool Python EVTX. As mentioned, it comes with multiple different subtools. So one of the tools itself help us to process the structures within the event log file and print it out the informations. So what we can see at the start is going to be the ELF file, which is the magic header. We're going to see the next record identifier, which is presented in the hex view. And finally, it's going to be the header chunk size itself, and the value is going to be at 1000 hex. So over in the hex editor, hex itself, you can see that after defining the structures, the header is going to be beautified over here, right? And you can see that at the start, the magic header is going to be appearing there, as well as the other informations. So one of the key part is, I believe, for the the next record identifier, it's supposed to be at hex of 350B. However, 360B. However, within the hex viewer itself, you can see that the value is represented as 0B36, right? So do note that these informations are recorded as little endian. That is the different why, what you're going to see is going to be printed is a different view as what you are seeing in the hex editor. And now next would be the chunk itself. So what would be within the chunk? So the first things that you're going to know is there will be another header. We call it the chunk header. Then there's going to be an array of event records. Yes, that's going to be where the juicy part is. And finally, there would be a place called the unused space. That's interesting. And also one thing I want to talk about is the chunk header itself. So the chunk header usually takes up to 512 bytes of size. So in hex itself, it's going to be 200 hex, right? And within the chunk header itself, that's where you're going to see another magic header, which is called the ELF chunk, and followed by some of the information such as the first record number, last record number, or rather last event record number, the first event record identifier, as well as the last event record identifier. And also, I just want to take some time to talk a little bit about the last three rows from the left screenshots, right? So you're going to see that at the last three row is going to be the last event record data offsets, as well as the last two is going to be the free space offsets. So usually for these free space offsets, it's going to be the pointer to the positions where new event records are going to be written down. That's going to be the pointer where the records are going to be written to. And over at the right side, that's where you're going to see the structure of the file is going to be passed out and shown you in the screenshots. You're going to see that the first record number is going to be the 35F2. So at the top, I have already converted the hex view to a decimal view. And of course, for the next last record number is going to be the 360A. And that's going to be the 834, as what we have seen in the earlier slides. So when we are viewing it in the hex editor, so all these informations are going to be shown and beautified and grouped together using colors. And if you were to hover it over the color itself, or rather the view itself, it will actually shows you the structure or the variable names as well as the informations in decimal. So once again, I want to highlight from one of the contents from the slides before, the EVTX file header itself is up to a 1000 hex value size, right? And that is the reason why when you are looking at the event chunk, is starting at the 1000 hex offset itself. And now, finally, it will be the event record itself, right? So each event records have its own unique magic headers. So it's going to start off as the 2A hex value itself. That is to signify that this is the start of an event record. Subsequently, you're going to see information such as the event record identifier, the timestamp where it's going to be created, as well as the other values subsequently. So over at the right side is just some of the mini tools that we created to try to pass out this file to carve out the event records from this file. And what we get to see that when we are at the last record itself, which is 834, the positions that we are finding this file is going to be at 4B40. If you remember from the previous slides, the offsets for the last record is supposed to be found at 3B40. So why is there a discrepancy? The reason being is because when we are looking at the offsets, or rather the values from the chart header itself, it does not take into the considerations of the event file header. It is a relative positions based on the event chunk itself. So after you include the event header itself, which is a size of 1000 hex value, it will give the ultimate, or rather the exact positions to be at 4B40 offsets. And by trying to cover all these event records, what we can see is that at the later offset itself, we can dig out a more historical records, which is dated on the 22nd of May. And that is going to be different from what we have seen earlier in some of the tools, because most of the tools are going to tell you that, hey, the earliest record you can get is going to be 28th of May, right? And we also get to see that the event record identifier over here is at 778. And subsequently, of course, you get to see more and more event records, which we will show in the next slides. But before that, we'll take a look at what is it going to be look like within the hex viewer itself, or hex editor itself. So what you can see over here is that at the positions of 4D80, you can see the magic header of the 2A appearing. And subsequently, in the text view, you can see information relating to this record itself. So now, let's try to pass out all these records and try to see where they are coming from. So the first part that we get to see is the first record, 810. So the exact position is going to be at 1200 offsets. And why is that so? Because the first 1000 is going to be the event header itself, then followed by the chunk header, which is going to consume 512 bytes, which is 200 hex in value. So that is the reason why after these two headers itself, you are going to be directly facing the event record itself. And next, as we are passing along the line, we get to see that we have reached the 834, as what we have shown previously. And by trying to carve it out more historical records, we are seeing records such as the 778, right, in the later positions. And by looking downwards, you're going to see that all these event records are being written sequentially. And as we proceed further down the road, or rather down the file, we can see that there is a record of 809 available within the file. And if you take note from all the tools that we have been using, the earliest record you can get is the identifier 810. So with this, we can see that we are able to extract out some of the historical records through the file itself. And if we were to go even further, we can see that there are records that is being created dating 14th of May available within the file. So with that, before I go to the takeaway, I just want to share that, through the file itself, there are really some of these very interesting informations that can help us with our investigations. So most of the time when you're performing investigations, it's very important that we have the visibility. And that's going to bring me to the takeaway part. When you are performing an investigations, it's always very important to ask yourself, does it mean that when I'm not seeing certain things, it means that it's not happening? No, that's not the case. Because in an investigation, there's always going to be an answer. And one of the famous quotes is going to be the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So with the absence of the evidence itself, it does not mean that certain activities is not taking place. So one of the most important things is when you're performing investigations, don't ever give up. Try to use different angle of approach or different ways to try to answer the questions that you have in mind. For example, whether lateral movements is taking place, whether or not there's going to be data exfiltrations happening within the environment. The next one is going to be reviewing your current tool sets that you're using. So most of the time when you are performing investigations, we are performing analysis based on our experience as well as knowledge that we have learned throughout, the education periods and so forth, right? But as technology advances, there will be different tools that has been developed to help to resolve certain questions, or certain observation has been identified, and they try to create a tool, open source tool that can allow everyone to use it. So for this part, do review some of the tools that you're using, whether they are going to provide you with the best visibilities during your analysis. And people is always going to ask me, oh, does that mean that I'm going to get a specific individuals to constantly looking at, reviewing the tool sets, get an overheads, just to do this and that, it's going to cost resources as well, right? Then we will bring it back down, Is it necessary for us to go to this stage? Do I really have to, go deep into the Windows event log file itself just to answer, or rather to complete the attack path? So one part would be, if that's not what you have been deploying or using, it would be the EDR, which is the endpoint detection and response tool itself, right? So aside from the response tool itself, the EDR can help you to do detections, right? It allows you to understand whether there's anomaly or suspicious activity happening within your environment. And with that, it generates alerts for people who are supposed to handle those alerts to be aware of the situations, such that you don't have to face the ransomware aftermath, right? You can be aware of the presence of the threat actor at the early stage. And you don't have to consume so much resources as well as times to handle all the aftermath of a security breach. And the next part would be whether you are centralizing your logs to your SIEM. And why is that so? Because if all these Windows event logs were being centralized within the SIEM, during our investigations, we could have queried from the SIEM itself to try to look at all these historical records. I would not need to perform all these kind of deep dive investigations or forensics analysis in order to identify how the attacker is coming in. That saved me a lot of time. And that's not all. If you are using some of the intelligence informations to ingest within your SIEM, information within some of these event logs can be correlated within this intelligence and help you to identify whether or not some of these indicators could be suspicious or malicious. And that will also help you to identify whether there's potential threats within your environment. So it's not going to be just about querying historical records, right? It also can be by correlating some of these informations with intelligence, it can help you to detect threats as early as possible. And of course, I need to emphasize that when I'm talking about logs, I'm not just talking about Windows event logs. I'm talking about your application logs, your Linux logs, and many other different kinds of logs, customized logs, and so on and so forth. So do consider this part. And if you are not reviewing this part, I will urge you to start looking into it. And with that, that's all for our presentations. I hope you guys enjoyed these presentations. And thank you for joining.